The movie begins with Edward Douglas, a negotiator from the United Nations, along with two colleagues, finding themselves adrift in the Java Sea. They've been floating for days after surviving a plane crash. One day, they quarrel over the last bottle of water. The argument escalates, leading to Edward's friends fatally stabbing each other before falling into the water. Their blood attracts a shark, which devours them. Edward, the lone survivor, remains stranded for days, nearly succumbing to hunger and weakness. Thankfully, he encounters a passing boat, and a veterinarian named Dr. Montgomery treats him. After a brief recovery, Edward inquires about his location and learns he's on a ship called the Ombak Penary. Despite his desire to contact his organization, Montgomery advises him to rest due to dehydration. He also mentions the absence of a radio on board, but promises to arrange transportation to Timor. Upon reaching Moreau's island, Montgomery encourages Edward to accompany him, promising access to a radio there. They unload a cage of rabbits before heading to Montgomery's farmhouse. Edward notices certificates with Dr. Moreau's name and realizes he's a Nobel Prize-winning geneticist who escaped to the island for research. Edward then sees a girl dancing outside and strikes up a conversation. She introduces herself as Isa, revealing her father to be Dr. Moreau. Before they can continue their conversation, Montgomery interrupts and directs Edward away from Isa. He guides Edward to an upstairs guest room. During their walk, Edward brings up Moreau's disappearance due to his animal research obsession, but Montgomery remains silent on the matter. Upon reaching the guest room, Montgomery locks Edward inside, citing safety reasons. However, Edward manages to unlock the door later, using a pocket knife as night falls. He explores the house and hears a strange cry nearby. Intrigued, he follows the sound to a laboratory filled with medical equipment and developing fetuses in cylinders. Despite his confusion, he moves toward the crying. Inside, he witnesses a female human llama mutant giving birth, attended by doctors, one of whom reveals himself as a human-animal hybrid. Frightened, Edward flees, but is pursued by the hybrids. Soon, he encounters Isa, who promises to help him escape if he agrees not to speak ill of her father. She leads him to the seashore, but mutant guards spot them. Evading capture, Isa leads Edward into the forest, where they encounter mutant creatures and a mutilated rabbit. They meet Assassin, a friendly mutant who offers assistance. He leads them to a mutant village and introduces them to the Sayer of the Law, a goat-human hybrid preaching human behavior. Edward is shocked by his appearance, with large horns and hoof-like hands. Before Edward can fully understand, Moreau arrives, revered as the father by the mutants. Montgomery, accompanying Moreau, threatens Edward with a gun, instilling fear in him. However, Moreau, not wanting to alarm him, instructs Montgomery to give the gun to Edward. Upon receiving it, Edward fires it in panic, causing disturbance among the nearby creatures. Observing this, Moreau activates a remote control, bringing the creatures under control. It's revealed that Moreau keeps the hybrids in check using remote-controlled electrical implants implanted under their skin at birth. This is one of the security measures he has implemented against his creations. Moreau calmly assures Edward that he won't be harmed. Edward is then taken back to the main house where Moreau introduces his 4 children, Wagdi, Azazello, Myling, and Isa. Moreau explains his genetic experiment, fusing human DNA into animals to create a higher being supposedly incapable of harm. While the current beast folk are imperfect, Moreau claims to be close to achieving the desired results. Edward expresses hesitancy and condemns Moreau's actions as unethical and illegal. Later, Edward joins Moreau and his children for dinner. Azazello serves his father a plate of food with a half-eaten rabbit, which appalls Moreau, who strictly prohibits meat eating. Isa mentions the mutilated rabbit she found earlier, attributing its death to a leopard-human hybrid named Lomai. Moreau decides to hold a trial the next day, inviting Edward to attend. However, before dawn, Edward attempts to escape the island by boat, only to be thwarted by humanoid rats occupying the vessel. The scene shifts to the trial, where the father gathers all the creatures outdoors. He begins by reminding them of the island's laws and accuses someone of breaking them. Sensing he's been caught, Lomai charges at Moreau, but Moreau subdues him using his remote. Despite being knocked down, the leopard hybrid continues to attempt an attack on the father. Witnessing this, Azazello ruthlessly shoots down the creature, shocking everyone present. Moreau reprimands him for his impulsive act and instructs him to organize a proper funeral for the fallen hybrid. Lomai's body is publicly cremated but not immediately disposed of. Shortly after, Hyena Swine, a humanoid hyena, arrives to mourn his friend. While examining the charred remains, he discovers a strange object embedded in Lomai's arm bone, the control implant. Feeling for the same implant on his own body, he roars in pain as he digs it out and removes it, vowing no more pain and intending to spread the message to all the other mutants. In the following scene, Montgomery administers a drug to the mutant. Edward inquires about it, and Montgomery reveals that besides the implanted chip, the animals are controlled through regular drugging to prevent regression. However, Hyena Swine refuses to take the dose. When Montgomery attempts to convince him, Hyena Swine shows him his removed implanted chip, causing Montgomery to panic. He quickly dispatches other mutants to apprehend Hyena Swine, but they fail to capture him. Later that evening, Edward tries to use the radio to contact the outside world with Myling's help. However, Montgomery interrupts them and sabotages the radio, enlisting Edward's assistance in finding Hyena Swine instead. Meanwhile, Isa expresses her concerns about her physical changes to her father, showing him her developing fangs, sharpening fingernails, and cat-like pupils. Despite her worries, Moreau reassures her of her beauty and advises her not to fret over it. At midnight, Hyena Swine and other mutants, now free of implants, infiltrate the main compound and confront Moreau in his living room, demanding to know why they are not fully human. The father, unaware of the implant removal, tries to console the distraught creatures in his usual manner. However, instead of accepting the law, they become enraged and reject it outright. Sensing the imminent danger, Moreau frantically presses the button on his remote, but it fails to have any effect. Hyena Swine then displays the removed chip to Moreau before leading the attack, resulting in the death of the father. Witnessing the chaos from a distance, Edward hastily fires a gunshot, causing the group to flee. In the aftermath, Moreau's body is cremated, and his children, except for Azazello, mourn his death. During this emotional moment, Edward approaches the grieving Isa, attempting to offer her comfort. She confides in him about her ongoing transformation and seeks his help in obtaining a serum from the lab to halt the process. Meanwhile, Azazello steals Montgomery's handgun and aligns himself with Hyena Swine's faction, who are plotting to seize control of the island. Initially, they set fire to the only boat to prevent any escape. Azazello then proposes to lead them to the island's armory on the condition that they assist him in removing their implants. Meanwhile, Edward ventures into the lab, finding it in disarray and encountering the deranged Montgomery. Despite requesting the serum, Montgomery claims to have destroyed it all and walks away. Left alone in the lab, Edward searches the facility and makes a startling discovery: samples and a file labeled with his name, revealing Moreau's intention to use his DNA to permanently halt Isa's regression, thereby completing his experiments. Meanwhile, the delusional Montgomery assumes the role of a king, promoting hedonism among the mutants. Azazello interrupts the scene and kills Montgomery upon arrival. Hyena Swine's group arrives, taking the mutants captive. In the lab, Isa approaches Edward, who reveals Moreau's ultimate objective to her. However, their conversation is cut short by Azazello and his group, who attack them. The gang captures Edward while Azazello assaults Isa. He uses ropes to hang her, resulting in her demise. Subsequently, he drags Edward to Hyena Swine, who commends his actions. However, he unexpectedly shoots Azazello, deeming him expendable. Later, Hyena Swine coerces Edward into acknowledging him as the new deity of the island. Amidst the torment, Edward devises a plan. He urges the hyena to become God #1 by eliminating all his followers. Convinced easily, Hyena Swine turns on his companions and shoots them down. However, during the commotion, Myling triggers an explosion, causing Hyena Swine to lose his firearm. Seizing the opportunity, Edward swiftly retrieves the weapon and points it at the hyena. Realizing his vulnerability, Hyena Swine retreats into the burning building and immolates himself in anguish. With the threat neutralized, Edward prepares to leave on a makeshift raft. The Sayer of the Law, Assassin, and other peace-loving mutants bid him farewell on the shoreline. Before departing, Edward offers to return with professional scientists and doctors to develop a serum to halt their regression. However, the Sayer insists they don't desire further intervention. They simply wish to revert to their natural state and end their creator's experiments. In the concluding scene, glimpses of human conflicts and wars are depicted as Edward reflects on the innate savagery within humans. The movie concludes with his assertion that he left the island out of fear and that humanity is the true embodiment of savagery.